listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It is Tuesday, August 31st.
Yes.
A lot happening in the world, or maybe things are not happening now. I'm not sure. We're going to check
both in.
Or both and. That's right. We're going to check in with Chaplain Muehler from LCMS Ministry to the Armed Forces in just a moment. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for your support of the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us in studio today, the Reverend Craig Muehler. He's director of LCMS Ministry to the Armed Forces. Chaplain Muehler, thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a joy to get to chat with you and learn more about what's going on with Ministry to the Armed Forces. And when we talk about Ministry to the Armed Forces, we're specifically talking about LCMS chaplains who are, many who are deployed. Where are LCMS chaplains serving today in the military?
Well, literally all over the world. But right now we have 12 who are deployed somewhere overseas, and actually with all the events that have happened, we actually have 9 of our Missouri Synod chaplains that are in direct support of the mission in Afghanistan. Of course, as we know, it ended yesterday's part of it. Obviously, we still have the refugees and all the aftermath and stuff like that, but we literally had 9 chaplains, a couple of them right at the tip of the spear during this whole evolution of things going on in Afghanistan. So we've been very active in bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to these men and women who serve our nation.
How has all of the situation in Afghanistan, how has that affected the work of chaplains over the last, month or so, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's no different than what's probably impacted across our country. It's just a sad state of affairs in the sense of seeing all those photos and, with the refugees. But our chaplains, they've always been deployed, so they always are ready for contingencies like this. In fact, that's what they train and plan for, evacuation missions or whatever other kind of things they need to do for our country. And so it's just kind of I'd say a God thing that, we had so many Missouri Synod chaplains in this kind of area, this AOR of support of Afghanistan, because I'm trying to think when I was in in Iraq and the surge in 2006 and 2007 when we were really having a lot of troops. I don't think we've ever had this many Missouri Synod chaplains at one time that were, forward deployed into the middle of it. So this was a unique thing, but I always, for me, as a retired Navy chaplain, see this as a blessing and so good for our church because we need to be there with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We know our chaplains are trained in their pastoral formation to deal with difficult situations, to bring the gospel in the midst of trauma. And so I'm so proud of these chaplains for being there, first of all, sacrificing their time with their families because they're deployed too. So they're going through the same thing, that their sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen and soldiers are going through, but they also are hearing all the other concerns that their service members have and counseling and taking care of them. So it's tough, and a lot of them will have some difficult times coming back, as they process it on their own, but they're at the tip of the spear with the Word of God, and that's just a blessing for their soldiers and sailors and Marines. I think that they know they got a chaplain they can rely on.
And thanks be to God for these chaplains. You shared a bunch of things that I really want to unpack here, and I know we only have so much time. At first, you mentioned this is a kind of a unusual time that we've had this many chaplains specifically in who are deployed at this time, LCMS chaplains.
Right.
Where are we in terms of the number of chaplains that we have today, LCMS chaplains, that are, I guess, is endorsed the right term?
Yes, that's the correct term that we use for endorsement for the Department of Defense to serve. Currently, we have 56 active duty chaplains, and we do have 5, I believe, and I should have brought my right-hand arm in here, Lee Hinton, the Master Sergeant.
She's sharp,
she has all the numbers there. But in this operation, we actually have 4 who are reservists, who actually have parishes that are on deployment, and they're in the midst of this thing in Afghanistan. So there's a story there to unpack with their congregational support in their outreach of allowing their pastors to serve in this ministry. So if you look at the number of 56, and if we have 9, that's a high percentage of the chaplains that we have on active duty or even in the reserves who are engaged in this operation. And of course, they always are throughout the world. But It's an important thing, and it's never enough. Should be my first answer. Mm-hmm. I know that we just need more chaplains, young pastors, to sign up for this. And I know it's a tough gig, and times like this, kind of drive that home. But if it's not us, then who? That's kind of how we look at it. Who would you rather have? Next to your 18, 19-year-old son or daughter in a trauma event like this, or a difficult operation, than a good Missouri Synod pastor who knows law gospel, who can bring the gifts of God faithfully, in the midst of this situation.
Mm. Well, thanks be to God for those congregations who so graciously have shared their pastors, who are chaplains as well, who I can't imagine what that would be like to... it's tough to send a family member off, but to also send your pastor off and with God's blessing to go and serve in this way. Share with us more about how chaplains have been able to serve and bring hope, especially in this difficult situation.
Sure. One of the biggest things that a chaplain can bring is the Navy will call it deck plate ministry. The soldiers will sometimes call it ministry of presence, but it really is that walkabout. You're with your flock. You're not sitting in an office. You're not waiting, for anybody to come to the chapel. When you're deployed, you are living with them, going through everything they are. So a chaplain's day-to-day work is basically taking care of themselves, obviously, physically, mentally, and spiritually, but also then to be present and among these young men and women who are serving with them. So it really is constantly running into them, in their workspace, or being available to them if they need to talk. Because again, remembering not only are they going through what's happening right now in front of them, their mission, but they also have issues back home. A lot of these young 18, 25-year-olds are in a relationship. Maybe they just got married, or maybe they're just dating, and, it's on and off and going through everything else that you all remember. We're not that old, right? Those years of those relationships and just emotional struggles and, being separated from their support network. And then at the same time, they have to focus on the mission at hand and taking care of, all these, beginning off with the refugees and, just being inundated and lack of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Are there specific things that you can share? I know some of this may not be appropriate to share on the air, but are there specific things, ways that you can share how these chaplains are helping with the refugees and with the people that are dealing with this crisis right now?
Yes, I can. I think it's, again, one of the neat things is that we have a chaplain at Qatar, which was one of the first places that the first refugees were evacuated to. And he is a reserve chaplain from California, Travis Ferguson, and it's okay to share his name. And he was like at the tip of the spear. They're the first ones as they were being, I hate to use the word overwhelmed, because military doesn't like to say we're ever overwhelmed. We're just adapting and overcoming, right, when something happens. But it was an unusual situation, and so they were working very hard, and we were available from Ministry of Armed Forces to help reimburse them or get them support as they immediately had to get, shirts, clothes, food, water for this huge amount of folks coming over. And of course, the system catches up. It's just for the immediate impact. So Chaplain Ferguson was right there in the middle of it at the very beginning. And then, of course, we also, another evacuation site was Ramstein in Germany. And we have two chaplains there as well. Chaplain Raymond Ayers, who serves with the Army on Ramstein, the Air Force Base, and then Chaplain Sol Grosskopf. Good name and name. Grosskopf. So he's one of our new chaplains, too. He just been on active duty a year.
Yeah.
And so they had obviously the same challenges of the refugees coming and making sure acts of mercy that they can provide for them. But another big piece of that is they also have to keep their eye on, the airmen and the crews that are flying. They're exhausted, so they're also helping with refugees, but they got to make sure their personnel are taken care of, and they walk around and provide them and say, how you doing? Because, they're trying to stay focused, fly this plane, get them out of here, and air crews and the whole gamut. So those were three chaplains at the beginning of the mission. And then we did have one of our reserve chaplains who actually was sent down to Kabul, to the airport, to support the evacuation process. And unfortunately, he was present when that explosion happened. So he was right there, during the midst of that trauma, the dark times, to to take care of, it was the Marines and a sailor and one soldier, as you've seen the count. But sometimes we forget about all the other casualties. So we still have lots of our Marines and soldiers at hospitals, hoping they're going to make it through recovery. And so he was right there in the midst of all that, obviously helping the surgeons. He described it to me as like being in a MASH TV show, just surgeons everywhere trying to take care of all these people who were injured. So, but again, what I try to encourage him and support him is saying, but, it's a blessing that you were there, because we know that you have the gospel, the message, the counsel of God, the gifts of God to bring to these people in their darkest times and tragedy. And then one of the other chaplains, this is why this is just phenomenal. One of our other chaplains is with the 24th MU, which is the Marine unit that lost the Marines. So even though he wasn't there, he was connected to these Marines through the Marine Expeditionary Unit that were lost. So he was working closely with the repatriation of the bodies and working with the fellow Marines, and obviously very traumatic as well, as they did all that to get the Marines home with their family, as you probably saw in the news. I mean, they're at Dover, and now they'll from there go to be delivered to their families as they can be. So those are just some. And then in the background, we have 4 chaplains on Navy ships that are there for, providing air support and other kinds of needs out there. So, we're in the middle of it, and it's all what they kind of joined in for. They wanted to take care of their soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. But when you get into a situation like this, it just becomes more real. And it's a life-changing event for sure. So one of the things that we want to do, and I reach out to your audience too, and for our chaplains, is obviously continue to pray for them, but to assure you that Ministry of the Armed Forces and Office of International Mission is going to be there for them when they return to ensure they get the pastoral care they need as they reconnect with their families, especially the reservists, because they're going to have, they have to come back to their family. They have to pick up their parish pastor responsibilities. So we want to make sure that's where Operation Barnabas comes in, and we switch hats to be the Operation Barnabas to help them reconnect with their families, work with the congregations to give them the time they need off, so they don't show in one day and then the next day they're in the pulpit at their home congregation expected to pick up where they left off, as they process all the stuff that happened on their deployment, to reintegrate with their families and their congregation. And so we stand by to support any way we can with that. So that's one of the things that my office is going to really be working on as these folks begin to transition back to home. For the active duty, they go through it, obviously, but that's where the commands come in. They can give them the time, and they have more of a support network, if you will. Whereas if once you come back as a reservist, you're detached, you're back in the middle of your civilian world.
Right back into civilian life.
Yeah.
We have more to share. We're talking with the Reverend Craig Muehler. He's director of LCMS Ministry to the Armed Forces. We'll share more on and an update on the way that chaplains are serving today right here on the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We're talking with Chaplain Craig Muehler. He's director of LCMS Ministry to the Armed Forces, learning about the ways that our chaplains are serving today, particularly with the situation in Afghanistan, and how the chaplains have also been so ready to serve, but also how this impacts them too. When they're when things hopefully settle down, they'll have that transition back to life here, whether they're reservists or whether they're active duty, and then coming back to, I'm not sure if I'm using the right words here. I want to make sure I'm using the right terms, but in making that transition back. And they're not the only ones who will be making a transition. You mentioned refugees as well. What happens next, Chaplain, in terms of the refugees and the next steps, and how the chaplains will be assisting in that?
Sure. Well, I have to be careful. That's not really my lane, but I do know that what we have is support network set up. So as they transition from overseas to CONUS, the continental USA, different bases or locations or wherever they are, obviously the needs will still exist. And what we're planning for at Ministry of the Armed Forces is we have chaplains obviously also here at some of our bases and stations and installations. So to coordinate the effort to, if refugees need certain things, I know a lot of our congregations, they're so awesome, and LWML and all of our serving agencies just already reaching out. How can we help? What can we do? And so we want to be very proactive about it to make sure that we get what they really need. So we're working with my office with Lee Hinton, who's my assistant there, to be the kind of the point of contact to see what the needs will be, in the near future, so we can make sure that we can meet the needs and not just sort of guess and overwhelm them with care packages of stuff that they don't really need. But as you know, it's not just our church, but even all of Americans are asking out, how can we help and support and be there. So, but that is one of the things that we're looking at, and we just want to keep that line of communication open with our chaplains and us, and then with our congregations who just, love Jesus and want to help their neighbor.
Mm-hmm. If people are interested, is there a way of contacting you, contacting Lee, so people who hear this and who really want to help, what can they do? Yeah,
the best way is just to email her at lcmschaps@lcms.org. That way it's our org box, so we can track it and make sure we keep everybody in the loop. And then if you want to contact her, then we can keep that list, sort of like our Adopt a Chap program. Mm-hmm. We'll keep the list, and then as the needs arise, we can reach back out to them and say, hey, we need 500 quilts at Fort McCoy, or we need whatever we need. So I think that's the best way to do it, just so we can manage it and not be overwhelming to our chaplains, but at the same time meeting real needs that are needed by our people.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be an ongoing process, probably for a while. For these chaplains to be handling these situations.
Yes, I think. Yeah. Again, I'm not sure how that all works. It almost has been since Vietnam. Since we've had whatever, we've always had sort of immigration and things challenges that we try to reach out with. But I know there are organizations that I don't even know about yet that will be helping, and so we just don't want to be in the way, but we want to offer our support and at the same time bring whatever we can to help these people.
Sure. What are some of the next steps then for these chaplains who are also going to be reintegrating? You mentioned Operation Barnabas. Tell us a little bit more about how that is going to help these chaplains reintegrate back as they return.
This is one of those times I'm just so grateful that even my predecessor and others kind of did a pivot on this to do a focus with the program Operation Barnabas, which has been around since 2007 of intentionally helping all reservists, not just reserve chaplains, but it originally was started for this very reason of helping our pastors reintegrate back into their parish life and their families, to give them the time they need. Because another side note about that is that even though let's say their unit comes back, they do all their debriefings and they're finally let go from their unit, and now they're back to civilian life until their next drill. The chaplain is still the chaplain for all of those reservists that they served with. So they have a bond and a relationship. So even as the chaplain is trying to reintegrate with his wife his kids, his congregation, he's going to be getting phone calls from these others that really, they got a close bond. That's who they're going to call, because a lot of them are unchurched. They have nowhere else to call. So that stress and pressure also will continue so they're not really going to be totally to drop their pack, as we say, their rucksack, and say, hey, I'm home, I'm done. That's fine. So we're constantly with Operation Barnabas trying to work at ways that we can help. So we will, financially help by helping pay for a vacancy pastor or some way to get them so they can just be with their family and their kids, just to do their own. And then as these other needs come out, maybe we can help, whatever the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who are calling them, to work together as a team. So that's where Operation Barnabas really does step in, is once they got their discharge orders from this training mobilization, we pick up the ball. Well, actually, we're already working it now, contacting the congregation's leaderships and district presidents and saying, hey, we're here to help. Anything we can do to help these young pastors transition back, because we got to take care of them, or we may even, lose them. This is hard. It really is hard emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And our church has such great things. One of the other places I just was able to go to the doxology training last weekend is doxology will be a huge part of that, to ensure that we get them to a doxology respite retreat or something like that. Or Shepherd's Canyon has come in to help. So we have all kinds of RSOs that also step in and support our pastors and their families.
You mentioned earlier that, and confidently, that the chaplains that we have are well prepared for what they're given to do, that they're well equipped to do that. What is that? We have just like a couple minutes left, 2 or 3 minutes, but what does that look like, that formation for chaplains? And if someone's thinking about, if a pastor's thinking, maybe this is where I want to serve next, what does that look like?
I think it's just our Lutheran theology. It's what we get from the day one at the pre-sem or the seminary, just being in the Word and understanding life and death, what it's all about. I mean, it's really is that strong foundation in the Word of God, and we understand that everything, that we do is a gift from God, and there'll be challenges, and so we know how to work through that. And I think it really is just our pastors' spiritual discipline to be in the Word themselves, because they know they have to, if their well is empty, it's going to be hard. And we do have burnout. We hear about clergy burnout. So for me, I think it is just the beginning from their first day at the seminary, how our seminaries prepare them to be a pastor, to walk alongside people in their darkest moments, and to how to, be the pastor, the shepherd, under shepherd with the gifts of God. So that's what I think. And I think a lot of times other churches, again, I'm not calling out names or anything, but sometimes the training isn't that good. Maybe be all online, or it just may be, but we really take it seriously to prepare our pastors to be in the midst of life and death with our people.
So what, if a pastor is thinking maybe serving as a chaplain in the military would be a good next step for him? What should he do?
I'll email the same email address, lcmschaps@lcms.org. Again, that's lcmschaps@lcms.org. That is the best way. And then I or Steve Hokana, Chap Steve Hokana, my partner in crime here, will be glad to follow up with them. And again, if it's not active duty, there's reserve. We also have Civil Air Patrol. We have Coast Guard Auxiliary. There's other ways to serve, to bring the gospel to these young men and women who serve in our nation and wear our uniform. So, yeah, give me a call. Be glad to talk to you and see what's available.
Chaplains are needed anywhere, in many different places, as
Absolutely.
I think we've seen through the stories that you've shared today. You said give you a call. What's the number?
I'm going to give my cell phone number.
All right.
571-234-0073. Call or text me. I'd love to talk to you. It's a great ministry.
Very good. lcmschaps@lcms.org is also the email address. You can reach out to Chaplain Craig Muehler or Chaplain Hokana and learn more about serving as a chaplain. Thank you so much for sharing these great stories for us, with us from the field, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to keep our chaplains supported. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you to KFUO. We've always been a great partner, and put the word out there so we can have all the saints pray for our chaplains and our service members. Thank you.
Indeed. Keep us posted on how we and our listeners can support our chaplains in the next steps as well.
Will do.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.